Right, what we're going to do today is make you understand the pure mechanics of the pitching, the chipping, and without these you really won't play your short game too well. So first of all, I'm going to tell you how the wrist works in the actual pitching and chipping action. There's 4 movements in the wrist. The wrist moves up, down, side to side, and I call that a wrist cock, a wrist down cock, a hinge back and a hinge forward. And without understanding the wrist movement, you won't understand the mechanics of short game. And basic chipping is what I believe is that it actually rolls more than it flies. And for basic chipping you should use a hinge movement and no cocking action in the wrist. As I told you earlier, that's a wrist cock, that's a down cock, that's hinge back and hinge forward. We want a hinge back really, and that's all with the chipping, hinge back and hinge through. So it rolls very simply backwards and forwards. So it's back and through. It hinges backwards and through. Simple rolling action. The left hand does very little. A subtle left hinge, but a little bit more right hinge here, and take it through to finish. Okay, just a very simple chipping action. Now pitch is one that actually flies more than it runs. So what happens here, we want a little bit of cocking in the actual action. With the chip we add all hinge. With the pitch it's a combination of cock and the wrist hinge. So a combination. So if you watch very carefully as we go back, that's at a point where there's no real wrist cock, and as we go beyond that first movement, then the wrist cock. Now we're into the pitching mode when the wrist's cock. With that natural force wanting to fall, we've got to make sure we don't react to that. We've got to move it into a position where the club will fall down and allow us the momentum force to pick the ball up. So a very simple pitch is move the club through position, so there's no real movement in the wrist cock until about hip height, then the wrist cock. Now as we're coming back, we move the club back into this natural force where it uncocks. So it's a very simple wrist cock, wrist uncock. You know, simple as that really.